Today in News Tech, why niche podcasts can make money, an update on the fight for public notices, and finally, local newspapers aren't dying, they're dead, but they can be resurrected as a multi-platform digital news organization. The ongoing story, this is Watchdog Journalism, Terry reporting in, our investigative journalist, looking into the public notice, the war on public notices, which newspapers have relied on as a revenue source for years. Right, Terry?
Exactly. For centuries, actually. This is from a link that was sent to us by one of our publishers who's in the Michigan Press Association, just detailing the importance of public notices in a print edition as opposed to being relegated to government websites only. And I thought this was interesting because it says public notices provide this sort of transparency and accessibility to citizens who want to know more about government actions. Providing public notice provides the opportunity for the public to influence governing bodies and allows the public to be an active participant in a democratic society.
Yes, it's the separation of powers that we have learned about ever since grade school. And to have a government reporting on itself just doesn't make any sense. You really need to have a separate entity.
The government is accountable to the people that it represents. And then we also got a blurb from the Florida Press Association. Their legal notice bill is just wildfiring through. It's already on the governor's desk. This is just a quick overview of the travel it's made so far, and it's really been pretty quick.
I got a newsletter about this from Florida Press because we're now sponsors and members, and this is like about to pass. Right?
It's right there, and the
governor is going to sign it. Basically.
Yeah, and it's the thing about these public notice bills is there's not really, unlike the rest of politics these days, there's no partisan line. I mean, it's bipartisan.
Yeah. I guess you got people that are trying to defend these revenue sources.
And that's what it comes down to. Like you mentioned last week, the revenue source, I don't think that's a valuable argument. I will never believe that's a valuable argument. It's taxpayers' money, and it comes down to accountability and accessibility. You still have to pay for a public notice to appear on a website unless it's your government website, and it's kind of included in that package, which removes that element of accountability.
Yes, technically they could post it on the government site, but... And
I don't want it to sound like, the government has taken over, because it's not. There are rules and regulations in place.
No, these are the things that creep up on people. You don't even think about it. And, I never really thought about things that have been uncovered in long-term research studies that show that there's just more fraud. There's literally more fraud that goes up when newspapers go out of business from private and government entities that are run amok. And, then the news is coming from the local businesses' press releases and the government's official website. That doesn't seem right. I mean, solutions journalism, though, we always talk about it, right? Can you give us some hope here, or do you want to continue to tell us more about these details?
Well, I just want to take a step back. It's not like the government is taking over, because there are regulations in place that say the area has to have so much accessibility. Okay, there are requirements. So if your area doesn't have enough accessibility, then print is the mode that will be.
Interesting.
Yeah.
As in, like, not high-speed internet everywhere?
Right. And the same goes for print. I mean, you have to have so many subscribers in order to become a newspaper of record.
Right.
This is an interactive map that shows the number of bills relating to public notices that are going on. They're ongoing in each state. Texas has 21. There's your state, bill number, description, progress, that sort of thing. That's really cool. I mean, if you can just go to your state. Kentucky has 0.
You're saying Kentucky has no plans to change?
I'm not sure what the status of their public notices is right now, but there's no legislation.
So, I see. So we're like red alert with Texas. There's a lot of different proposals out there in New York.
Right.
That is interesting. Yeah, to see the spread there.
Yeah.
The thing I keep thinking about is if this is becoming something that's just out there and everyone has to compete over, because in the past we've had basically a monopoly on this. You have to come to the newspaper. If it goes back to competing, publishers can still compete on this. Like, you can make a better website and a better directory for these things.
I'm not sure at this point where they need to compete. I think they need to up their game as far as just getting one step ahead and making public notices available on their website, making them archived on their website and searchable so that they become that source. And once they are that source, it's going to be harder to take that away.
Exactly. Right. The playing field's being leveled in a way, so we need to hold on. It
requires a little bit of strategy.
Yeah. I mean, maybe we could focus this next week on the directory system, public notices. Most of our customers are putting these up. We extract them probably for most of our customers. Is that right, Terry?
I'd say it's probably 50-50, half and half. Some want them extracted. Some publishers put them up themselves. Some relies solely on their state website.
They also sometimes have us send them to the state website. Yeah, there's a lot of different press associations doing great things. They have nice websites that are a place that you can go and look at the whole state, just like a centralized source.
This tab right here lists all the requirements for each state. This I thought was really kind of cool. I might have shared this last week. This is a little 2-page PDF that you can print out or include anywhere, but it gives you just a nice, easy, digestible argument for why public notices should remain in newspapers. 2 things that our publishers can do. You can sign up for the Public Notice Resource Center newsletter, full of obviously what we've seen here, lots of information. And then also, America's Newspapers has a mega conference coming up. One of their featured panels is going to be on protecting public notices. That's coming up April 10th through 12th.
Yeah, they're going back in person this year. So let's definitely give them a shout out on social media. That's a great one.
Yeah, it goes into as well as every actions every publisher should be taking.
Excellent. Okay. Very cool.
So Matt, this came across my desk on Twitter this morning. It was retweeted by one of our authors that we followed before, Don Seifert. And I spotted this because he is the managing editor of the Boston Business Journal, so he's taking note of things that are happening in his local market. And so he retweeted this post from the Charles River Regional Chamber. It is a bit of a grabby headline here. Local newspapers aren't dying, they're dead. But what this is reporting is that Gannett has come in and has bought tons of local papers around the country. This has been something we've covered time and again. And even Don Seifert covered where last month Gannett shut down Saturday print for 136 of their local papers. Now this chamber is reporting that 3 of their local papers that are under Gannett's umbrella are not only going to be stopping print, they're going to be stopping existing. So these are just completely gone.
Okay, no website, no more web presence at all?
They're going away completely.
Yeah, so this is how the news deserts spring up, and it's really unfortunate. It looks like some of them are going online only, and they're trying that. But this is the regionalization of the news. It's getting out of communities. It's getting out of really hyper-local journalism and just...
This paragraph right here encapsulates that perfectly, is that when you notice the coverage from your local paper has no local news, then what good is it doing? And so this seems to be what Gannett is doing, is it'll go in and buy the local outlet. It'll pull any of the resources out. They get moved to a regional level so that they can disseminate, and basically they can give you more content for less money. And you end up with these husks of papers. And so he's reporting now that there's just a news desert when it comes to these small suburbs outside of Boston. They just don't have right here. Gannett has not had a reporter detailing Watertown for years.
It's no longer a local paper.
These are really old publications. I mean, the Needham Times, 1932. And it's just, I mean, Boston is one of the founding cities, and their papers have been around forever, and now you're losing all these bits of history.
Exactly.
It's really, really sad. And as far as Gannett goes, I shared that article with you, Christopher, that just this week they took a bunch of their Wisconsin papers, and they're no longer printing in Wisconsin. So there goes your local business. They're printing in Illinois.
I mean, we know the cost of paper, the cost of production is a really big overhead for papers. And when you start that's almost like mini outsourcing.
Let's put it in a positive light, though, and look at the solutions that are out there, because let's just revise this headline and say local newspapers aren't dying. They're dead and reincarnating as something totally different. It is possible, and it is happening. You just need to adapt to the new environment. I mean, it's just like evolution.
News as a concept is not going anywhere.
Right, exactly.
Proliferation of it is. It needs to be.
It's dissemination that's the big thing right now of, what are we going to be resurrected as? And I think that's what we've been trying to do with a lot of our recent coverage of success stories. I know this one's a bit of a pessimistic, but we have been doing some coverage of success stories where people are reinventing themselves. They've left a metro paper and they've gone and they want to create something that's local, that's neighborhood, and they've actually found a lot of traction. So it is possible, and that may be where some of these communities will end up turning.
These deserts are prime opportunities for entrepreneurs to come back in there. Ideally, you'd have someone like a Cherry Road Media or some locally owned corporation that can come in and buy the newspaper and save it before the publisher owner just retires and they can't find anyone to work, because a lot of people are having that issue these days, just in retail, just in general. If they can just keep it going or resurrect it as an online only, but we need to have somebody in these communities.
One thing that might be worth looking into is community feedback on this, because if you've gone for, how many months or years without having local news, how are you getting your news? Do you miss it? Do you want local news? Is anybody expressing that? And to me, I'm not seeing anyone expressing that.
They don't really recognize that it's happening. Their attention ends up just going to like national or international news, and they just kind of get wrapped up in all this drama that's happening all over the world and lose touch with their communities. If the information is not there, it's not like they're going to recognize, I haven't been educated on the business community. I don't really know what's going on. Very few people are going to recognize that.
I would argue that's part of what journalism is helping people know what they don't know.
What to focus on, right? You may not even realize this is happening, and you might be interested in it. This is what's happening. That's a good point, Chris. We'll just quickly talk about some of the opportunities that are out there for publishers. So this is the type of stuff that we're talking about. Just the whole distribution model has been disrupted. You just have to accept that. Now we have to work with companies like Google and Facebook to get the word out, but we can still control our information in an independent way. And that's through WordPress blog, publishing episodes to the podcasting apps, decentralizing yourself in that way, just getting at people however they want to get the news. And there's actual money forming in this area. For a long time, podcasting was just almost like a hobby. This is just from yesterday. Publishers are showing how these podcast pennies can turn into big money. The big take home that I got from this article is that if you're a small podcast, like a small niche podcast that's covering a community, that's definitely a niche in and of itself. But I think they're kind of talking about national brands. This is like a B2B energy podcast. So there's different types of niches, but community newspapers across the board are niche publishers, and they don't have huge audiences, but they can still monetize it. What this is saying is you don't want to deal with CPMs. You really don't want to try to sell impressions or use some kind of ad network. You want to just make a deal with an engaged sponsor and really make them a part of the show, make it like a native sponsorship, maybe interview them on your podcast, just really do a nice job. And these people are making thousands of dollars per episode, and they only get about 1,000 downloads per episode. So this is actually from one of our friends on Twitter, Peter Houston. We follow each other. He's one of the hosts of the Media Voices podcast, which is one of the biggest podcasts in our industry today. Because it is a niche audience focusing on news and news technology and journalism, they're not seeing more than 1,000 per listen and 3,500 max on one episode. So these are the types of numbers that can generate thousands of dollars per episode if you can really sell the whole exclusive sponsorship that you can give an advertiser. It's not pre-rolls, though. That's the take home that I got from this. It's not like a pre-recorded ad that you just play at the beginning of your podcast. You've really got to bring them into the show. And so like with Today in News Tech, we're demonstrating this concept constantly. We are sponsored by our hometown. So we're demonstrating our hometown products. We're talking about the news in the industry. We're talking about Twitter and stuff happening in the UK with Press Gazette. We're using our tools to tell the story. So if you could do something creative like that with your sponsor, that's what people really want to pay for. For example, the Media Voices podcast, if they were using audio articles on their website, that would be great exposure for us. So you just need to get creative these days, and the money's there.
Matt, was anything mentioned, because it sounds like you're talking basically about synergy.
Yes.
And I'm wondering
right.
if, because I've seen a few things where there's been some cooperative buildings between local newspapers and local TV stations that kind of do the same kind of back and forth of resource sharing and revenue sharing to a certain degree that could help someone launch a podcast like what you were describing.
That's an interesting idea. I can't say I have a lot of experience talking to publishers actually doing that. I do have the experience of seeing the network effect of partnering with other organizations that maybe have a head start in audio, or it could even just be like a local blogger or a local podcaster that's actually ahead of you as a newspaper because they've been doing it for like 10 years and they were just the first one to do a local podcast. But to partner up with these organizations definitely would give them legitimacy to be associated with the newspaper, and it gets you part of their audience. So you just want to be open to these cross-pollinizations as much as possible. And that's something we're going to be getting more into in the next couple of weeks. We're going to be scheduling some more interviews with the people that we've been reporting on in these stories. And we get their attention through Twitter and other social media by mentioning them. They see our first story on them, and then we do like a follow-up. It's kind of our model. Today in News Tech, the podcast covering innovation in digital journalism. You can follow us on Facebook and Twitter and subscribe on YouTube or any of your favorite podcast apps. We'll see you tomorrow.
At our hometown, we help newspapers build WordPress websites, design native apps, and develop digital subscription models. If you are interested in a free prototype of your publication on WordPress, go to ourhometown.com and click the Contact Us button.